Episode 276. Ron Paul, Tyranny Through Twitter.
Dr. Paul, welcome back to the show.
Good to be with you.
Yes, thank you so much for being on again today. I believe this is your 5th appearance on the show, but it's been a few years, so it's wonderful to speak with you again. And what I wanted to talk to you about today is the Twitter files. If you've been following the releases that are coming out from Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss, and others, going into all of the strange censorship that was happening, especially around the 2020 election. And one thing in particular that Matt Taibbi revealed is that the FBI and the DHS was meeting weekly with folks at Twitter. And, you know, to me, this seems just patently obvious that this was a violation of the First Amendment, if not a criminal conspiracy to interfere in the election. From your perspective, because this is, again, the government meeting with Twitter and also getting data from Twitter, using Twitter to collect data, is this not an obvious violation of the First Amendment? And do you think it's also not indicative of what was probably happening at Facebook, Google, and other companies as well?
Yeah, I think that is the case. Because over the last couple of years, this has been a struggle for a lot of libertarians. And I had to sort it out because at first, we want to protect private property. If you own a newspaper or we're in the church or we have a meeting or we're in our house, you say anything we want. We can kick people out if we don't like them. And people can't walk into a church building and say, I want equal time, and they can't force yourself on a newspaper. So we want to protect that, and that is so. So most libertarians that I knew, and it included me, is we didn't jump and say, oh, wait a minute, we got to need to find out what's going on here. But there's been a lot of complaints over the years anyway, and we had a lot of sneaky suspicion. So even before this became very knowledgeable a couple of years ago, or even in the last couple of weeks, we kept saying that there's a greater connection, because I know for the whole period of time that this has been going on, my reference to it would be saying that that the social media were an agent of the government, that they weren't separate, they don't qualify as private property. And yet it wasn't as explicit. So when I saw this, I said, well, this really, fits what my beliefs have been, because they got too close. Once they take money from the government, it is not going to be a freedom of choice. And there was so much blackmailing going on, and it was going both ways. If governments didn't do what even the social media did, they could punish the social media, and social media could do the opposite. It was incestuous, and of course it was a long way from private property, and that is one reason why this fits into the category of corporatism, because it's a mixture of power and money and wealth and influence between corporations, which should be completely separate from the government, or just the government where it's a clean cut and where people stand. So I think in a sort of a weird way, this is really pretty good news, because it's going to maybe sort things out, because there's been a lot of information. And now, that's the big thing. Who's doing the misinformation? It might even clarify the whole notion that there may be, at least for history, it's going to be this way, a better understanding of who's guilty in the Russiagate affair, because that, of course, was very biased and unreasonable.
Well, we do know that Jim Baker was somebody working at Twitter, and he was actually recently let go. And this was a bit of a headline. But something that has not been a headline as much is that there are still at least a dozen, if not more, former FBI agents who are working at Twitter. And some people have made note of the fact that a lot of these individuals had long careers at the FBI, 20 plus years. And one individual, Jeff Carlton, he was only with the FBI for a few years, but he was also with the CIA and military intelligence. And it's kind of concerning that there are still all these individuals inside of Twitter with these long experiences in intelligence. Elon Musk was actually asked about this. Somebody asked him how many former FBI agents are working at Twitter. He didn't answer the question directly. He just started saying that the FBI is generally good and there's a few bad apples and whatnot. So do you find it concerning that there are still many different FBI agents who are still working inside of Twitter. I mean, and this kind of goes to the whole public private division as well, because
Right.
before the 2020 election, it was a bunch of it was 50 former intelligence, former in quotes, intelligence officials who discredited the Hunter Biden story. But when you're a former intelligence asset, isn't it still possible for there to be some effective government interference, or interference from at least an elite class into what a private business is doing?
Yeah, and it's very easy for me to have an opinion, and it would be based on the fact that, I've been in politics, I've had to deal with a lot of these people, and I know something about history, and I know something about what I've said 20 or 30 years ago about the FBI. So yes, I think they're there. I was surprised. It was great. Everybody celebrated the fact that Baker was finally fired. But my first question to myself and my friends is, I would have assumed he would be gone long ago, But see, since my position is very clear cut that all this is extraneous, we shouldn't have this, because I consider the FBI as anti-American, anti-constitutionalist, and I think somebody played a clip when I was doing it might have been the time I was doing the Libertarian campaign in '88, that it should be abolished. We shouldn't have this.
Most of our history, we didn't have those institutions. The FBI came in during the First World War, and interestingly enough, the one thing that Woodrow Wilson did, he used the FBI to spy on American citizens and actually arrest them if they disagreed with his foreign policy about going to war in Europe. And isn't it interesting how recent they used it in the Vietnam era? Democrats used it there, and Republicans used the FBI to spy on 100 different groups in this country, including the churches, who disagree with the policy in Central America. It almost looks like the FBI was designed to spy on Americans who might be disagreeing with policy, especially the foreign policy.
It's always going to be abusive, but it's always good to find out about it, because Musk is right. You can't say every single person that's ever been in the FBI, is an evil monster. But they're more honest about it. But the principle is bad, and it encourages bad people to get in. A lot of people have done very dumb things in the police force and the military, and yet there's a lot of activity in the police and the military that it's very questionable, and but that doesn't mean that everybody that's ever been there is a bad guy. But the principle is bad, and it encourages the bad people to get involved. And I think that could be said about politics. The people who take advantage of doing whatever they can to gain this power in politics. That feeling and attitude and incentive isn't as strong with a true libertarian, because the libertarians are, I don't want all that stuff. We shouldn't have that. We have a constitution. Why don't they follow that? But the thing of it is, those who love power, and the real menace, I think, is what happened during COVID. Because this inspired a lot more people, and it inspired a definition of what federal government is. They just put mandates on and recommendations and threats and all kinds of things, and then the states rolled over and did it, and they loved it. And they all of a sudden, I'm sure they did it before, but we didn't read daily about an executive order by a governor causing trouble. Fortunately, we had a few good governors that used the executive order to do the exact opposite, getting rid of some of the federal regulation. So it's a very bad system. So the solution is an ounce of prevention. This stuff should be prevented, and I think you could use that as an argument in just about everything. You could use it certainly in monetary policy and whatnot. That we should not get involved. They're involved in education and medicine and everything else. So it's that mentality that permits these people who love power to become interventionists and be heralded as heroes to take care of the people. That's where the real tragedy is.
Well, again, what's concerning for me is just the response that Elon Musk gives to these questions, where he doesn't answer directly, where he says, the FBI is generally good. He also was recently asked about Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, and he said he didn't have an opinion on that, which seems really strange, especially for somebody who's, in the tech space. to just not have an opinion on these two whistleblowers. But I see a larger trend as well, where we're seeing not just Elon Musk, but a lot of big establishment conservative commentators who are talking a lot about free speech and really rallying around DeSantis from Florida. But I'm also noticing similar things, where a politicization of COVID policy, which of course was terrible, the all the mandates and whatnot, those were bad things. But it seems as though it's now acceptable to criticize Fauci and criticize some of those things that did happen, and then also a lot of discussion around these woke issues. It seems as though these are now acceptable political topics to run on, and it seems as though the Republican establishment is really seemingly propping up DeSantis as their favored nominee in 24. And we hear a lot about this, about Trumpism without Trump. And just looking at DeSantis and how he seems to be sort of favorable towards the neocon foreign policy, whereas Trump was a little bit more unpredictable. Do you see this as, again, sort of a weaponization of these different topics that are, nominally good? Free speech is good, and fighting back against the COVID regulations are good. But do you see them as possibly being used to prop up somebody like DeSantis to bring the MAGA crowd back into the Republican establishment insofar as supporting foreign policy?
You'd have to do a lot of assumptions, I guess, to try to put that all together. But I think they do come together to a certain degree, because there's always questions. Right now, Musk is at a very high level, but over the years, before I knew a whole lot about it and started learning about Tesla and other things, and then when I figured out how much money he gets from the government, because he's involved in corporatism, and yet I have to say I was really happy with him firing Jim Baker. But my question was, why did it take so long? This is the thing. And now when it comes to DeSantis, yes, they're using that, and I think people that are populist and not libertarians, and they might have a complaint about Trump and his approach is wrong, so they might be by using this. But I generally look at more, what are they actually doing? What are their beliefs? And when they give their speeches, they have to sort of, mellow something that they believe. But I don't think anybody really cares or asks any questions about DeSantis's foreign policy. And that to me is a big deal. That's what I talk about more than half the time on my Liberty Report. And he is a bit hawkish, but he and others do this in the name of patriotism and a strong national defense, defending the Constitution, defending liberty. And I don't believe that kind of stuff. I think the hawkish foreign policy, the interventionist foreign policy, is a threat to us. When I see this, the threat is what we do and overreact. I didn't feel threatened by Ukraine. I didn't think we had to go over there and create a coup and take over that thing and start spending like crazy. I think the real threat is exactly what's happening today. It's speeding up the bankruptcy, and that's what people ought to be concerned about. How does a bankruptcy end? And usually when a country ends, the bigger the country, and if it approaches an empire, the worse the ending is, because there has to be the liquidation and the correction in order to get it back to a free market footing.
Well, Dr. Paul, I don't only have a few minutes left. I had a bunch of patron questions for you, so I want to read you at least one of them. And this one is from Nick. It says, how can we better unite the libertarian right and the anti-imperialist left?
One by one, and some people, that was one of my goals. It was a pretty secret because not too many people knew about it. There was one time a member of Congress gave a 1 minute, 5-minute speech afterwards, and I happened to be at my television. I watched the speech. I didn't know him, but he was a moderate Republican, about a nice person, but he was giving this 5-minute speech. And obviously there was something there that I liked. He was probably a moderate, and he probably, had some civil liberty beliefs. So I called him the next morning, and he wasn't there. And the staff said, well, I'll give him his message. He might look for you on the floor. And an hour or so later, we had a vote on the floor. And this gentleman that I had called to talk to, he says, "Well, you called me. He was curious along that hour because we really didn't know each other." And I just told him, I said, I really, liked, your speech. We became very, very good friends. It's amazing what that did. And he was one of the 6 Republicans that voted against the war when we had that major vote, I guess, in the Iraq War. So I think it's one by one, and we were able to talk to each other. Dennis Kucinich and I, and Dennis, of course, is a Democrat, but I don't look at it and say, well, I have to convert them. They have to come to my lectures. They have to attend my libertarian luncheon. And every once in a while, people would come for various reasons, but it was just 1 or 2 at a time. I don't think you can do it. It's not a project where you make an announcement and all of a sudden there's a conversion. And it is also a reason why you can reach people, I think, through education. That's how this country's been destroyed by the radical left getting control of our universities. But it's also the reason why I have a Ron Paul curriculum, because I want to influence people. Oh, you want to indoctrinate? No, I want to indoctrinate. I want to encourage people to think throughs and at least be exposed to history from a different viewpoint, and exposed to Austrian economics. And that's a little bit different than indoctrination. That's sort of indoctrination of a political belief, not an introduction to a philosophic viewpoint.
Well, so we have just a few minutes left. I'll ask you one other question. This is from John McCarthy in Chicago. He was wondering if you're familiar with the FBI attack on the Uhuru movement. And they falsely accused them of being Russian agents. I don't know if you heard about that FBI raid.
No, I don't know. I don't know the details of that, but if it had to do with the FBI, I would be very cautious.
Okay. How about this one? What do you think about the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's invitation for the USA to join the Belt and Road Initiative?
Well, I don't know the details of that, but I don't like any international organizations. I think that that is a real problem. I was sort of not quite old enough to express my viewpoints about Robert Taft, but when they were starting NATO, he said we shouldn't get into it. It would lead to a mess. It would lead to us defending Europe, that sort of thing. So no, I think that I want to deal with individuals the best I can, and small groups and small states, and certainly not joining. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have this openness. Even if some of you disagreed with it, give them a call and say, "Hey, what can we talk about today?" So I would be willing to talk to people about that, but to join something, I think that's a big problem, because the politicians and the financial people, the military-industrial complex, the social media, they put a lot of pressure on people to say, "Oh no, you're going to lose a lot of votes. We can deliver millions of votes." So that's why pure democracy is very, very bad, and people should look at the issues, and that's what we really makes the difference, is the issues and how we support it. But the job we have as individuals is making those issues palatable enough that people say, "Hey, that is a good idea." And I think in a little way, I contributed during the campaign that, I talked a lot about the Federal Reserve. And I think the Federal Reserve is better known. Auditing Fed is better known.
Absolutely.
And so it's sort of an idealistic, an ideology way of doing it. But I do think tone is very, very important. That if you think you know everything, and you approach someone and say, "I know better. We shouldn't be over there, and you're gonna cause a lot of people to get killed if you don't change your mind." That's not my approach.
Well, Dr. Paul, another patron, Ronwald, just wanted to know that you're a hero of his, and I have to say you're a hero of mine as well. I think what you did, especially during the Bush administration, was very heroic, where you were a lone voice for peace and for liberty in the Republican Party.
Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition to this resolution. The wisdom of the war is one issue, but the process and the philosophy behind our foreign policy are other issues as well. But I've come to the conclusion that I see no threat to our national security. There's no convincing evidence that Iraq is capable of threatening the security of this country, and therefore very little reason, if any, to pursue a war.
I have to say, I'm quite saddened by the fact that there's nobody in the Democratic Party right now doing what you were doing back during the Bush years. Just it seems as though they're universally in favor of marching towards World War III, for example.
Right.
But again, I appreciate all of your heroism. For folks out there who would like to follow you and support you, how can they do that?
Well, I go to the website, Ron Paul Liberty Report. I do a program, a live stream at 11 Central Time, almost every day. But we try to keep up, especially with the issue of liberty and peace. The motivation at the beginning was mainly came from Daniel McAdams, who works with me, is on the program. It was to be in foreign policy. But you can't separate the two. Economic policy, foreign policy, it's all the same thing. It's the principle of liberty and how you apply it to social things, economic things, foreign policy, people overseas or people that live next door to you.
Well, Dr. Paul, I really do appreciate your time. Thank you very much, and I hope to have you back again sometime in the near future.
Good. Nice to talk with you.